Hey guys, in this video I wanna share which ones I consider to be the best first-person dungeon crawlers, but I have to clarify three things. The first one is that there are a lot of video games out there, so there's no way to play all of them. For that, I'll be sharing my thoughts as I get to play them. The second is that I am just limiting this list for consoles, as there are a lot of crawlers for PC. Some of those extraordinary, but for the time being, I'll let them out of the list. And the third is that I am basing this list in two things: a story and how far you can go with the teams you can create. Acá, customization. So let's begin. In number 5 we have Shin Megami Tensei: A Strange Journey. In terms of story, this is one of the best SMTs, as it has a really mature story since the beginning, with the apparition of something like a dark hole in the Antarctica. After that event, the United Nations assembles a team of 4 amphibians to start exploring the phenomenon, decision that would lead into a spiral of messier and messier situations. What keeps an interesting story here is the series of decisions the crew took to stay alive, but also knowing about the battles that the primordial gods had long time ago, wars that decided the future or current state of humans, and how the human development led to this situation. As I've said in other SMT games, I highly recommend playing it according to your values and morale. Here it doesn't matter if you choose one route or another, you can fight pretty much every demon. And also, every ending has its cool things, so don't limit yourself for a particular ending. Of course, I recommend you to play the 3DS version, as it is the definitive edition so far, unless you want to suffer a whole crazy way with the original DS version. Its gameplay is completely different from the usual SMT, because here, depending on your alignment, your team composition for optimal cases has to change. And the classic press turn system is changed for demon co-op, so after you hit a weakness, the whole team that has your alignment joins for extra damage. So as far as customization goes, this is an SMT that changes the classic dynamic. Just keep in mind that these are first-person dungeon crawlers, and they are known for their difficulties. This one is no exception, but its level design goes from something clever up to the most annoying points. And from experience I can say that there is a point where you may think, yes, the torture is coming to an end, just to end up noticing that you are in the middle of the game. For number 4 we have Labyrinth of Galeria. This one follows the story in 3 different arcs. In the first one, it revolves around Eureka de Soleil. For the second, Natural. And the third, pretty much the culmination of the second arc, leading to some sad endings. This one is not going to be a story for everyone, because even when it is marked as M, it has moments in its story that can be quite annoying for a lot of people, so keep that in mind. And another thing to consider is that this story takes its time to develop, so don't expect something like 5 hours into the game and have a strong plot. Consider around 110 hours of gameplay in some of the best case scenarios. However, if you go past those things, story-wise, it is really good. Its narrative has really deep messages because of different character development and how everything is twisting as you proceed in the game. Gameplay-wise, it is convoluted and simple. This one has a huge character creation improvement compared with Refrain, because here you can keep every single skill that the puppet has already learned. Just to give an example of this, let's say that we want to create a character. We have to consider a pact, which is where the puppets are going to be allocated. That is important because depending from their class, there are pacts that further specialize a role. Once we have created the puppet, we have to use that main class as a base for the later facets, because initial skills have a budget reduction, so we need to consider the skills that are a heavy investment, and for the following classes choose the skills that are not that pricey, unless we have a particular idea on mind, but that improves the character. And at the end, choose the facet that adds the best attributes for the particular role we want. In this case, this can end up like this. What I can recommend you is to make a character with every single class and check in what excels every facet, so you can take the decision about the skills and budgets. This way you can have quite unique characters or brigades that excels in a particular role. The third part falls down to acquiring equipment to further prepare your puppets. Once you have understood that and applied it to the gameplay, some parts become really easy. But the whole character creation and management alone can be a long journey. If you're unsure about this game for XY reason, then I can recommend you to start with Refrain. If you finish Refrain and you're still craving for some more, then jump into this one. This is a first-person dungeon crawler for something like patient people or veterans in their genre, as it can be gimmicky in its level design, as well as requirements to keep progressing in the story. So pay a lot of attention to what the NPCs say, as it is important to solve particular puzzles that can lock your playthrough since the first arc. But in all honesty, don't use a guide, at least for the character creation, otherwise you are going to lose on a great selling point. For number 3, it is a series that has led many people to know what first-person dungeon crawlers are, or at least I have seen a quite number of people talk about these games. Etrian Odyssey. Now, Etrian Odyssey are many. I am still missing playing the third entry and finish Nexus, but there are two that are extraordinary for their level design. If you ask me, the fifth entry is the one I will say, go for it. In Etrian Odyssey we don't have as strong a story as the previous games. It is more about a group of adventurers that arrive to a city and start exploring the first stratum, which eventually leads to beat the first Celestial Guardian. There is a reason why this game is named Beyond the Myth, and it is because it goes further and further up in these dungeons. Story-wise, while it is not as strong, it is entertaining to read. The reason why it is here is because its character creation is quite different compared with the traditional approach of classes in other RPGs. One example of that is that in usual RPGs we have paladins, guardians, knights, or whatever the name you want to give to that defensive unit, but they always take the front line. In this one, we have the main defensive character that goes on the backline, and as that, we follow a different approach for some other classes. Plus, this is the first Etrian Odyssey that added other species as playable characters, since the beginning, which adds much more personality to its gameplay, along the particular classes this game has, so you can go for a classic adventure or something quite unique. If there is something in which Etrian Odyssey excels, is that they have entertaining level design, with the usual crazy challenges, and if you are up to the whole journey, you will understand this dumb image. For the second place, we have Stranger of Sword City, Revisited Edition. Story-wise, it has an entertaining beginning. Think of it as a kind of isekai where people from our world end up falling into this weird region. You might want to play Saviors of Sapphire Wings first, but it is not a must. From that point onwards, you'll get to see why people end up coming here and what happens to them, the reality of this place, and your personal decision about light, darkness, or neutral. Don't think on those endings as good, bad, or best, because it doesn't work like that. Once again, I will say, try to follow your morale and values. Later in the post-content, you'll get the chance to play the other parts of this story. Nonetheless, it has interesting twists. And one of those endings is a bit anticlimactic, but the ending itself says that it was your choice. For the character creation, we have everything since the get-go, and that is what makes this game hard as heck. Think on it as a Soulsborne for first-person dungeon crawlers, but as always, a bit of patience and strategy is what we need here. Every character has entire freedom to reclass whenever you want, and also they have a number of slots to allocate the skills that the character has learned. So ideally you want to define as precise as possible who is going to have which role, as you can combine skills between classes. So the first thing I can recommend you is to create one unit of each class and make a list of the skills you want for each role. That way, since the beginning, you'll have a clear idea in which levels you have to reclass. That can make the game a bit hard in some areas, but it is better to have a decent idea than pressing further and then end up noticing that your team is not even decent. For the main story, it is not that important, you can mess up really good every unit, but for the post-content, if you actually want to finish it, believe me, you wanna pay attention to it, as there are areas where enemies can chew your party in one turn. Just as something extra to add, what I loved about this game is its level design. There are gimmicky areas where magic doesn't work, poison areas, and several puzzles that give an old school vibe, but nothing impossible. And for number 1 we have Moero Crystal... No, I'm just kidding. Undernauts, Labyrinth of Yomi. The story of this game is extraordinary. Slow to build up, but once it takes inertia, it doesn't stop. It explains that the labyrinth suddenly appeared and many people flock into these places to mine. While it was risky, it also meant a lot of profit. Nonetheless, that activity will cease with time. The company where this main character works had the chance to get into one of these districts, but they had no money to hire experts on the matter. That's how they started recruiting in sketchy ways students and pretty much anyone who was tough enough to become an underdog. Right away the game lets you know that this is not going to be the classic adventure where there is a happy ending. On the contrary, it has a good number of sad turns, and the people down there have to live through some depressive situations. But the way its narrative flows, in my humble opinion, is one of the best. Gameplay-wise, there are only 8 classes. Not that many, but something that makes this game the best in this category is that you can reallocate skill points whenever you want. And oh boy, you have no idea how many times I heard something like, "The game was hard but I messed up my character and I dropped it." In this one, they explain in a clear way. This background works for X, Y, C class. So since the beginning there's no way to mess up. And even if for some reason you didn't increase the attributes that you needed, once you promote your unit, you can reallocate those attributes. And the promotions are quite interesting because they further specialize a unit or bring something like a subclass. And among the classes, there are multiple skills that help one another. What I'm trying to say is that while its character creation is great, it gives you a level of freedom that I haven't seen in other RPGs. But don't get me wrong, the game is tough, not as annoying in its level design as some of the previous games, but for sure you are going to see game over a good number of times. And that's it. I have a decent number of these games on my radar, so once I finish them and compare them with different entries, I'll make a part 2. But for the time being, in my humble opinion, these are the best first-person dungeon crawlers you can play, for their stories and customization. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.